Today we're going to have Renee Brown, and she is both a master gardener and a member of the Plumeria Society, and she's going to be telling you all about waking up your Plumeria.
Can you go back to that? Thank you. I'm sorry. Good morning. My name, like Michael said, my name is Renee Brown. I am a master gardener with UACC County Master Gardener Program, and I am also the co-curator for the Plumeria Society of South Texas, which is, we are the keepers of the grove, which is the Plumeria trees that are here housed at the Botanical Garden. We maintain them, we take care of them, we check them for diseases, we run the irrigation system. We propagate, we have a big sale usually twice a year, kind of just depends, you know, we've had this big freeze last year, so a lot of us lost our Plumeria, no matter what we did, it just sort of happened. So anyways, myself and another gentleman take care of them, we spray them. I'm also a TDA licensed structural pest control in pest and lawn and ornamental. So I use that to spray when needed because I have a license. So the Botanical Garden will let me spray. We try not to spray, but once in a while you just have to. There's just no two things about it. You just have to sometimes spray with stuff. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about waking up our Plumeria. So our Plumeria over the winter have gone dormant, and you should have some at home maybe with no leaves on them. They normally wither up and they fall off, and sometimes I clip mine. I cut mine a lot of times because I'm putting them in my greenhouse. And if you don't do that and you're putting them in a greenhouse or your garage, the leaves dry up and they crumble and fall on the floor of your garage and they make a big mess. So a lot of times I trim off my leaves. When we're going to trim our leaves, you need to cut them. A lot of people, and this kind of gives me anxiety when I hear people do it, people will get their leaves and just pull them off. Well, what you're doing is you're damaging your plant. So when we cut them, and when we cut them here at the Botanical Garden even, we're leaving a little nub on there, and the nub is usually about 1 inch to 2 inches long. There's no science on it, but just leave yourself a little nub, because that way that little nub is going to dry up and it's going to fall off on its own. And that way you don't have so much mess, you're not spreading disease. What if you had rust on some of your leaves and you go put them in your garage and you've got all your plants stacked together in a cardboard box and you're spreading that pathogen? So you want to make sure to avoid that. Make sure to have your tools really clean. One of the things that I do, and I have a bucket of supplies, and I have an old washcloth and I have alcohol. And in between trimming, maybe a couple, or maybe I do one tree, depends on how many leaves it has. I make sure that I clean my tools, because dirty tools spread disease. So it's real important to do that. Just plain old rubbing alcohol, you could actually have it in a spray bottle. You could have it diluted a little bit. It doesn't have to be full strength. And then always kind of oil your tools at the end of the day. You just got to keep them in kind of good shape. If I was going, I've got one right here. If I was going to trim this leaf off, and I'm going to bring it to the center so you can see. If you were going to trim this little leaf off, all you're going to do is snip, and always pick these up and put them somewhere, because you don't know what's on here. And when I'm trimming mine to put them away for the winter, I usually sometimes leave one of the little tiny ones on there just in case. So when we had that bad freeze in February of last year, I had about 150 Plumeria trees. And at one point when we lost power and propane, I had to make a decision what I was going to do with my plants. So this is called dry rooting. And a lot of people do this. In fact, the Plumeria Society does this. The trees that aren't in the grove across the driveway, they're dry rooted like this. A few of the baby plants are in dirt, but most of them are dry rooted. So this is called dry rooting. So all we do is pull them out of the dirt, shake the dirt off, and kind of dust it off and shake it and save your dirt. And I stood mine up in cardboard boxes. So you can just stack them, stand them in a cardboard box, and they will stay the whole winter like that. They don't need any water. They don't need any dirt. People worry about it, but it's called dry rooting and they're fine. And you notice this is kind of a tall plant for a little bitty root ball right here. Well, plumerias don't get a big root ball. So, and if they do have a little bit bigger root when we take them out of the ground sometimes, it's okay to trim them because you've left major roots on there. So this is called dry rooting. So when we're getting our plumeria ready to wake up, there's some things we want to do. We're going to have them maybe in a box, maybe they're going to be in their pots. We need to check them. So we're going to check our cuttings to see if they're calloused. Thank you so much. I want the room go. I think we're okay on that one. We want to make sure if we have just cuttings in our box and they're not dry rooted, we need to check the cuttings to make sure they're well calloused. This one is not calloused on the bottom because I cut it this morning. You will learn more later why I have this plant. You're going to be excited you're on the front row. Anyway, so we need to check them. So we're checking the health of the plant. We're checking our plant for disease. I'm going to move this one. There's a reason I'm keeping it away from everybody. This is a plant I wanted to show you. This has sunburn on it. See how it's got some yellowing or some kind of browning right here? Can y'all see that? Okay. These plumeria actually get sunburned, and you will need to check some of this for damage. If it's firm and healthy, you may not have anything going on with it, but you can kind of feel them, especially if you've had them where it's been a little bit cold. But this one was damaged from last summer. So it's just dry root. I had it in a bucket, and look, it still feels real good and healthy. So there's nothing wrong with it. This plant, which I'm very sad, it's California Sally. It's one of my favorites. This plant has gone bad. So when I get to about right here, you can notice it's got some darkening in this area. And then look right here. So this plant is no good. It smashes all the way. It's about to break. So this was dry rooted, but for some reason unknown, it has just decided to go bad. It could have had a little pathogen. It could have had a little injury. We're just not exactly sure sometimes what happens. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to put it right here with y'all. I can feel right here it's bad. And this is little bitty. So this plant does not have a lot of hope to root. But if I was at home, I would cut it. I want y'all to see it looks ugly in there, and it's brown and black. So this is not a healthy cutting. This is not a cutting I want to root. So what you're going to do is you're going to keep cutting, and this is almost healthy, but see, I'm running out of space here. This little nibby thing is not going to root. But if you were cutting and trying to get a healthy cutting of your plant, you're still going to cut till you get the inside healthy, clean, and you should get white sap. This one doesn't have white sap, so there's no hope for this plant. But I just wanted y'all to see kind of what has to happen. If you had a healthy plant, and you've got a big old limb, and you're cutting and cutting and cutting, cut till you see good white flesh, and you also have some white sap coming out of it. So, and we don't know why this thing died. I'm very sad because California Sally is a beautiful plumeria, and it also has a strong, beautiful fragrance, and the flowers are big. It's one of my favorites. Another thing is we need to check our rooting system. Now see, this one has kind of a weird rooting system. At one time, this was a cutting. It's a seedling, but it's a little bit older because it's got some of the wrinkling on here, the scarring. But at one time, somebody kind of bent it a little bit. So when you're checking your plants to get ready to repot them, you need to check to see, does this look potentially like it might break? So we need to kind of inspect everything for the root system. This one doesn't look too bad. If I was going to well, I will repot this one. Repot this one, I probably would put a little brace here just because it's got a little damage right in this area right here. Okay, so we've got our plumeria. We're checking them for disease and bugs. We're going to check them for the major things that plumeria get are spider mites. They get rust. They get white flies, and they get black spots. And later, when the class is over, I've got some slides, some handouts here, but I want y'all to kind of look at them. probably the people on Zoom can't see them real clearly, but we can, this is a plumeria that's kind of crying. So you can see that it's got some weepage. It's got some brown drainage coming out of it. So this plumeria was exposed to the freeze. So it had some damage from getting a little bit too cold. 40 degrees is the danger zone for plumeria. If you're letting them outside, I don't even put mine at 40. I usually bring mine in or move them, especially maybe even 50 because our wind chill is so bad here. Here we have another one. Look, you can see that right there. It's crying. It's sad. It's got some brown drainage on there, so it's a very sad plumeria. We've got two examples of bad. You know how we were cutting it just now, and I saw brown. This one where I cut had a little, only one side had a little bit of brown edge on there. And then I took a pin and I poked it on the side with a little stick pin, and it cried little brown tears. So it has a little brown tear coming out right there. So y'all are welcome to look at these when the class is over. Now, we're inspecting our plants. We're getting ready to put them back in the dirt. So you have to check where you had some limbs break off. So what happens is sometime in storage, sometime before we put them to bed for the winter, limbs have broken off. So it's real important to make that cut. If you're going to cut something, cut at a 45-degree angle. Because if you want to cut, so when it calluses over, the rain and the water doesn't hold in there. This is an example of a bad cut. And what happened was this broke, somebody cut it, and then they cut it too close to the mother plant, and there was no way to kind of make a clean cut. So right here, you can see it's calloused, and it almost has a hole. So what's going to happen is water's going to sit in that. So let's say it rains or you water them, it's going to sit in that hole, and it's going to cause rot. So the solution to that is a little bit of wood putty. So what you're going to do is take some cinnamon like we put on our cinnamon toast, and you're going to look at that wound and make sure it looks pretty dry as best you can. You're going to dust a little cinnamon in there because cinnamon kills bacteria on our plumeria. And then you're going to put a little wood putty in there. Don't put too much cinnamon. You know, we don't want to pack it on there. But put some in there and then put you some wood putty and smooth it with your finger and let it dry. And that will seal off any holes. So we're inspecting, we're getting ready to plant, we're looking for plant diseases, we're looking for breaks, problems, we're looking for sunburn, we're looking for any damage that our plants might have pre-putting them in the ground. Okay? So, yes, sir.
Why not just cut it?
Well, this is a little bit too close to the trunk of the tree. You could, but when the closer you cut to the mother tree, you're getting in danger of hurting the main trunk of the branch. And it does make sense. And sometimes you can recut them, but this one came to be already cut wrong. And so I ended up putting putty on it because I was trying to save that. Because sometimes leaves and branches will actually come out of that cut area too. This is an example of a clean cut. Y'all look how pretty and wide it is. So I showed y'all a dead one a minute ago, and if y'all want to come up after class is over to look at the examples, you can come see what old brown ugly one looks like. So this is one of, I think this is Nina Dawson. She's trimming the leaves outside of the plumeria. This gives an example about where to cut. So remember I said, if you've got any leaves before you repot, it's best to go ahead and just take them off because your plant will then be trying to feed leaf production. And we are trying to feed our root production right now when we're putting them in the ground. So let's go ahead and remove any of those. And you can leave your little leaves. You can leave your little claws on top, but make sure to cut any of the big leaves off. I have one plumeria at home that's kind of like, let's say it's called like an evergreen almost. It still has leaves. And it is a numbered tree that I won, and it's from the Elizabeth Thornton collection. It's outside in the freeze because I just thought it's not named. It's a numbered plant, so I don't even know. It has full leaves. They have no wind burn, no sun damage, no freeze damage, and it's been sitting in the north wind out in the country where the wind hit it. So that thing is tough. So I'm going to keep that plant now. I've decided to love it. Yes, ma'am.
What do you mean by a numbered plant versus a named plant?
If you have a named plant, it's from a propagator like Jim Little, Elizabeth Thornton, Jungle Jack. Jungle Jack's real famous. Mine is a numbered plant because it came from the Elizabeth Thornton collection. They were pollinating 2 different trees to come up with a new tree. So they don't give them a name yet because your name has to be registered and it takes several years to get a tree named. So they numbered them. We also have noids, and since you have brought that up, I'll talk about it. A noid is a seedling that we cannot name. So noid means no ID. So I told you I'm gonna go ahead California Sally, so I know she's California Sally. This one is a seedling, and this seedling, I brought it because it's really interesting colors. This seedling, I know what the mother was, but you don't know what the father was. So you can't name it Petite Rogue or Rogue Petite. You can't name it California Sally. You have to say seedling of California Sally. And you still can't name it. So everybody calls it a noid, no ID. So if you hear that terminology, you're wondering, what are they saying? Because when I first started, I was like, what are they saying? And I was trying to figure it out. But they're saying no ID, noid, N-O-I-D. So it doesn't have an ID. So my numbered plant is a noid, but I know it came from Elizabeth Thornton, and they were pollinating different plants together to try to get new variety, and then they register them. And the main big growers, it's not like HB Walmart. So, anyways, this is an example of somebody trimming the leaves. And so don't forget, leave a little nub on there. Don't just jerk it off because you're damaging your plants. Mealybugs. Mealybugs are another thing that we have so much problem with here in South Texas. Mealybugs are little white, fuzzy looking little things, and you'll see them underneath your leaves sometimes. And they love roses, they love plumeria, they love many plants, and they do a lot of damage, and they're really hard to get rid of. This is one of the cases where sometimes you just got to use a chemical. We try not to because we got to save the bees, but sometimes you just really have to go ahead and spray them with something good. You do need to spray under the leaves. Normally they're on the stem of the plant sometimes, but most of the time with our plumeria, they'll be under the leaves. Here's one where they're almost like all solid. It's a real thick infestation on here. I want to say 2 years ago, we had a lot of mealybugs here at the rose garden, and the rose garden has a dirt sidewalk, and then there are the plumerias. Well, we kept getting on the plumeria. We couldn't figure out why. Well, then we found out they were at the roses. So they were migrating over. So then we started treating the roses and the plumeria, and then we got rid of them. So check your plants for mealybugs.
What do you use to get rid of them?
Well, there's a couple of different things, but there has been some stuff we've used here at the Botanical Garden that has been the best. And this Bayer Bio Advanced 3-in-1 is really good. And one of the reasons I like this is it's systemic. So systemic means it's going to soak into the plant. So when you're spraying it, it's soaking in. So it's a little bit better treatment than a one-time spray. And a lot of times we can't get all the way underneath all the leaves. So if it's systemic and it's soaked in and you've only got it on top of the leaves, it's soaked into the plant. So it's going to kill some predators. It also kills mites. This one. It also kills fungus, rust. So it's a 3-in-1. And you can, I think I bought some of this at Turner's. Turner's asked me one day, why are we selling so much? And I said, we're telling everybody where to get it. And there's one for roses, but this is the one that I like the best. Now, another thing while you're talking about that, we're going to talk about mites right now. A lot of times when you're looking at your plumeria and inspect them, you're going to see these little speckledy dots on your stuff. This is called stippling. And what has happened is spider mite has got on there, and they're just like sucking all the green out of our plant. And you'll see it like through the center usually first, and then it kind of spreads out. And spider mites are very hard to see. They are the tiniest little red-brown dot you ever saw in your life. And you may not see webbing. You may not see any other indication that you've got spider mites, but you will see this stippling. Now, spider mites are mites. So if you just get a general insecticide, and let's say we use neem oil, there's a possibility you might get rid of it with neem oil, and probably because neem oil is a little bit tough and it kind of is an oil and it kind of stays on a little bit better. But insecticides normally do not work on mites because a mite is a little bit different with its body structure. So the reason I like this product is because it does kill the spider mites. So we've got some spider mite damage on here. And when class is over, that cutting over there that I was keeping away from everything has spider mites. So it has live spider mites on it, and I brought it so y'all could actually look at them, because to me that's pretty interesting to be able to get a plant and look at it. And it took me a while to find a spider mite plant, but I decided to bring it today. We're going to keep it away from everything else, and I'll put it back in my car and kill the spider mites afterwards. But there's spider mites on this plant over here. So you look for that kind of damage through the stippling through the center, okay? This is black spot. A lot of times people send me messages on Facebook and they'll say, I've got this plant, it's got all this, what's wrong? Somebody told me it's rust. And it just gives me a heart attack when people name everything rust. On Facebook, people ask a question and they'll say, oh, it's rust, oh, it's rust, oh, it's rust. Rust is not the common answer for everything. This is black spot fungus. Black spot fungus a lot of times happens because we've got our plants too thick with the leaves. Spider mites, same thing. It's a good idea to keep your plumeria trimmed out. And a lot of times when I've got a tree that's real thick, and when we've got them here at the botanical garden that are real thick, there'll be a work day where we go in and we're just trimming about half the leaves out of there. You want to keep airflow in there. It keeps down your insects and your disease. If you've got a plant that's beautiful and it's just thick, we've got a lot of humidity here in South Texas, you're going to end up with black spot. So it's one of the diseases. This also works on black spot. You can also use, black spot is a fungus. So you can also use F-stop. There's a product called F-stop. If you're just treating fungus, you want to use something, F-stop is good. But a lot of times I just do this because it's a little bit simpler to just cover everything at one time. Okay, white flies. I wish I could have had some, but I didn't. White flies are these tiny, tiny little flies, and they seem to come around when it's time to cut the cotton and pick the cotton. So every year when it's the end of the harvest season for the cotton farmers, these white flies have been in their fields and they go everywhere. I've seen them on plants, I've seen them on plumeria, I've seen them on rose bushes. One of the best ways you'll know if you have white flies on your plants is if you go out there and you tap it like this, and you'll see these tiny little flies get in the air, and they're almost, I would say almost smaller than a gnat. So tap your plant and you'll see them, and they'll be under the leaves. So you also need to treat for that. To me, these don't give as much damage as everything else, but I will also tell you what takes care of these ladybugs. So there's been times where I didn't want to use chemicals, so I've ordered myself some ladybugs on Amazon or someplace, and I've gotten ladybugs and I've put them in my greenhouse, and I put a pan of water in there because ladybugs need water, and the ladybugs will go in there and eat all those white flies. So we do want to try to be as natural as possible when we can. Doesn't always work out, but a lot of times let's try a natural approach before we start spraying a lot of chemicals and stuff like that.
I find them on my sweet potato vine.
Yeah.
Those dark purple ones, they
Yeah.
just go all over.
Because
that.
they like that dark color, and any of those plants that are kind of in that family of any of those cotton plants, it's the craziest thing in the world. Why do we get those when the cotton harvest is? But there's cotton fields across here from the botanical garden where there's not houses a little bit further down, and every time they strip that cotton, there'll be white flies here. And the same thing at my house. I live out in the country, plant cotton across the road, they strip that cotton, I got white flies. So I try to be proactive before everything gets infested. So when y'all come up to my table after a while, this right here, and it's gonna be real hard to see on Zoom and in the room, this leaf actually has rust and white flies underneath it, and so it's a double hit on this. So somebody who had this plant wasn't being very proactive with taking care of their plants. This is another one of stippling. You probably can see it a little bit better. It's just little dots. So just make sure you're inspecting all your plants before you get them in the ground. This is scale. We normally don't have a lot of scale. I have never seen it here at the Botanical Garden on our road, but once in a while you'll get scale. A lot of time it will attack the roses, but once in a blue moon it will get on your plumeria. So just kind of know what it looks like. To me, it looks like a little seashell, like half of a seashell, and it kind of attaches.
The barnacle.
Yeah, it looks like a barnacle, and you can kind of scratch it off and squish it. It'll be a little bit brown under there, like you're squishing a little bug. But just check, just to make sure before you put everything in the ground. Okay, here is the dreaded rust. A lot of people on Facebook say, oh, that's rust. Somebody will put a picture saying, what's this? And it'll be a leaf with brown crusty stuff on it or dried on the edge and say, somebody will put, that's rust, that's rust. No, rust is a powder and it looks like turmeric. It's bright orange and it will be under your leaves. And let me tell you how it spreads. It spreads like crazy. But what happens here at the Botanical Garden when we're having a work day is we go with our sleeve and you go like this to look up leaves to check them. So it's now on your sleeve. So then now you go to the next plant and lift it up to look and you just transferred it to the next plant. So what we do is we try to look without lifting as best we can without our sleeve. We trim off the leaves. We hold them so they don't hit the ground because rust can lay dormant in your soil till the next year. So right now over there where we've just got some other plants and we've got some mulch and stuff over there, we're going to treat that ground cover before we put our plants in because there is going to be rust there and it's dormant in the soil and it's going to come out and re-infest our new plumeria that have no leaves. It's really tough. And that's another reason I like using a systemic because it's soaking in. So it's kind of like a double hit on trying to get rid of everything. So remember your rust is bright orange and it looks like turmeric. Sometimes it'll just be a little bit of dots. This is real severe. I've never seen this severe. This is a picture out of my Master Gardener book. But here we've never had it this bad. I've seen it pretty bad, but not super bad. But remember, don't let your leaves hit the ground. Have a bucket like this or have a bag or a box or something. So if you're trimming and you find out you have rust, try not to spread it because it spreads real bad. Last about diseases we need to check for is the mosaic virus. I have not seen any. I have not had any at my house, but I've seen it on roses. So mosaic virus is a mottling, kind of like a swirl, almost like if you had some coffee and you put some cream in it and you were kind of swirling around like they do at fancy Starbucks. It's kind of a mottling. So a lot of times people think, oh, the leaves are just turning yellow. I need to treat it with some magnesium or something like that. No, you've probably got, if you kind of look at it different from a leaf that turned yellow from overwatering, you'll see that only a few leaves have turned this kind of yellowing. So do y'all have any questions?
What do you do for mosaic?
There is no cure for mosaic virus. If we would invent a cure, we would be rich. What we've done here with the roses, and I'll talk about the roses. There was 2 of them that I found had mosaic virus last year. So what we did is we treated it with this real strong because it was going to maybe die anyway. So I said, let's experiment. So I treated it real strong with some real strong stuff, and I poured it next to it. I didn't spray it, and we cut it off. It was like on half the rose bush, so we trimmed all that off. And we labeled it so nobody else would come trim with their cutters and then trim another plant. Rumor has it, it doesn't transfer like that, but I just think we need to be safe than sorry. You know, don't try to have any problems come in there. Okay, so we have our rooted plants that we might have in our greenhouse. We have our dry rooted plants. We're checking for freeze damage. We're checking for sunburn, wrinkles. If you see your plants are wrinkles, and you'll see some wrinkles on some of them, do not water them. You could soak them just a little tiny bit in a little cup of warm water for maybe an hour, but take them out, shake them dry, and then go ahead and plant them. If you have no leaves, no water. That is the rule for plumeria. No leaves, no water. If you water these things and it's still cold and our ground temperature is still cold, because it is right now, our ground temperature is still cold right now, you're gonna get root rot. So it's gonna kill your plant. And I even wondered if that's maybe what happened to that one plant, but then I thought, how did it get water? You know, most everybody knows not to, but it could have happened. It could have accidentally got water in there from a spray or something. But you can mist them, get you an old sprayer, hand sprayer. You can mist your plants when they start getting the wrinkles, but do not soak them, do not water them. So when we're gonna repot, it's recommended by the Plumeria Society of America and several Plumeria societies use a mix of 50-50. So we're gonna use 50% perlite and 50% cactus potting soil. You wanna keep your soil light. If you're using a heavy soil like Miracle-Gro potting soil that everybody goes to get at one of the nurseries, that stuff, when you water, it holds water so tight, the plumeria is going to be overwatered. Plumeria do not like a lot of water. So we want to mix 50-50 perlite because perlite will help it drain well. You want your pots to be drained well. And I brought some perlite in case anybody needed to see it. I usually keep it in a Ziploc bag, but I didn't have it. This is just white. It looks like styrofoam, and I'm gonna crunch it. And let me tell you, I tasted it one day. And let me tell you why. I had chickens at my house. I was putting baby chickens in an area that had this, and I wanted to know what it was gonna do anything. So I crunched it. But let me tell you what it is. It's volcanic glass. So it crunches. But my warning to you is you can get a big bag of it at one of our local nurseries for $20. And I'm telling you, it's a huge, big old bag. And you mix, I just throw it in a square that I have, and I put in a couple of bags of Landscapers Mix. One of the nurseries in town has a bag called Landscapers Mix, and it's very inexpensive. And it's the closest, least expensive thing you can find. It's just almost exactly like cactus potting soil. But 2 bags of that and one of the big old bags and just mix, or just do it in a wheelbarrow. But make sure not to breathe this, because when you're dumping the bag, a little white powdery dust comes up, and this is volcanic glass. And this will get in your lungs and you will cough a long time. So make sure not to get it, to breathe it. Make sure that also, if you have a cutting, let's say somebody brought you a beautiful cutting from Hawaii, and let's say it's cut at this end, it's cut at this end, and you're looking at it thinking, I need to root that thing, but I don't know which end is up. So the hint is that there's a smile, and it's right here, and that's where the leaves were, so it looks like this. The smile is up. So if it's like that, it looks like a sad face. So the smile up means you know which end needs to have roots on it. So that's kind of my little helpful way to remember. But every place that there was a leaf at one point, there's a little scarring area now where the leaf fell off. So it looks like a little smile. So smile up means and then you've got it right. I bought some plants a couple of years ago, I mean like about 40 from this lady, and she worked at a nursery. And there was 3 of them that never leafed out. And I was getting them to propagate for the Master Gardener sale so we could sell a lot of plumeria. Well, there was 3 that never rooted, and I kept looking at them like, what is going on? And she had taken one of the cuttings and put it backwards. And she even worked at a nursery. So what happened was I took it out one day and looked at it, and there was leaves at the end trying to come out and curl in the dirt. And it was, kind of like, I didn't tell her about it. So anyways, make sure to inspect. Now, let's talk a little bit about fertilizers. When we get ready to fertilize, there's a lot of people, this is a real good fertilizer, and I use this a lot of times. Kind of depends on what you want to do. So when you're looking to buy a fertilizer, you're going to the store, you're going to see those 3 numbers on there. The 3 numbers mean something. They really do. So the first number is your amount of nitrogen you've got in your mix. Your second number is your phosphorus, and your last number is your potassium. So let me tell you what each one of this does. The first number, like this one's 958.8. So I already know what this one does. So the 9 means we're going to promote leaf growth. So the first number on your mix of fertilizer is promoting leaf growth. The second number is encouraging flowers. So this one, the number is 58. So this thing is to push blooms. So if you've got your plumeria, and you want to push some blooms this year and try to get that thing to bloom good, you want the middle number on your fertilizer to be really high. The last number is hardiness and vigor. So right now, as we get them out and try to pot them and get them out of their dormant stage to get them to wake up, I would probably not use a fertilizer to push blooms right now. You want something more equal, like maybe 13, 13, 13. Because right now we have no leaves, we shouldn't, and we're trying to promote root growth because we're trying to get them to root. Okay, so don't get in that habit of right now hitting them hard and trying to get them to bloom when they don't even have leaves yet. Now they will do that, but it's kind of damaging to the plant. So we're trying to promote root growth right now. Epsom salt. A lot of times we use a lot of Epsom salt on our plumeria. A lot of times people are saying, why are you putting salt in your plumeria? I've had people tell me that. Epsom salt is not salt, it's magnesium. So what it does is it helps with your leaf yellowing. And a lot of times nutrients and stuff all wash away when we have too much watering and our pots are, you know, everything's washing out when we water. So if you've got a plumeria that's got a lot of leaf yellowing, you've already checked it, doesn't have insects, it doesn't have mites, you doesn't have rust, doesn't have black fungus, and if you've got some yellowing and you know it's getting good sun, shoot it with a little Epsom salt. And about 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons per gallon of water is a good recipe. If you got them in pots, just dump the whole thing in. I probably do mine. If I don't see problems, I don't do it. But if I'm having a plant that normally starts yellowing a little bit, it won't hurt to do it every 2 months. And you'll see new growth. Now the old leaves, you can kind of watch them to see if you see change. Check your new growth to see if they start yellowing, and you'll kind of know when you need to do it. Neem oil. A lot of people use neem oil because we're trying to keep our bees alive, and we're not trying to kill everything across the board. When I do have to use an insecticide, fungicide, miticide, whatever I'm using, fungicide, I try to spray it early in the morning before the bees wake up, or at dusk. Dusk is my best time. I really like to do it at dusk because if you spray at dusk, the little bees are gone. They're in their little house sleeping, and then the bees, by the time it's morning, this stuff is soaked in and dried up quite a bit. So but if you're using neem oil, read the label. There's some that are chemically, and they're chemicals, and they're just sort of not organic. Everybody thinks neem's organic. It's not all organic, so read your label. The other thing is neem is going to kill your insects, but not your fungus. So I'll see that a lot of times on Facebook that somebody's got black spot fungus and they're saying spray it with neem oil, and I'm like, what? Neem oil is for insects. It does not work good on spider mites, but it works good on the white flies and other stuff. But neem oil is not a fungicide, it's an insecticide. So go ahead and talk about that. Make sure to keep you some cinnamon in your greenhouse. Make sure to keep your cuts at a 45-degree angle. Make sure to put some wood putty on there. You're going to get them in the pot. Don't put them all the way at the bottom if you're putting them in pots. A lot of times I'll put some rocks at the bottom of my pot, and then I'll put my potting soil, and don't put your roots all the way at the bottom because they seem to get soggy and they seem to get a lot wet. And that's why a lot of times you'll see people staking up their plumeria with a little stick because they're a little bit floppy in the pot, you know, or even in your flower bed. They're going to be a little bit floppy because they're top heavy and we don't have it all the way at the bottom, and they're going to try to move a little bit. So rocks at the bottom helps, and a stake helps. Let me see. I think we have covered everything. Oh, water rooting. This is so cool. People are going to talk. I had to look at my table so I could see what I had left on. A lot of people will tell you your plumeria died because you watered it too much. It's not the water that killed your plant, it's the bacteria. So if you have a plumeria in the plant or plumeria in the ground and you have overwatered it, it's not the water, it's the bacteria that's going to form in the soil from the mix of the soil and the germs and natural bacteria, and you've got all that water in there. It's that, because I am a fan of water rooting. Let's make a mess here. This little plumeria stick rooted in water. So if water was the enemy, it would not have rooted. Rainwater is best, and I did it because this was a funky little cutting. It even had the top broken off, and it's kind of a little baby, and I was trying to save it, and it was one of those things of, well, let's just go ahead and try. So what I do is, this looks a little green, but I get some little containers I keep that are clear and glass. I put about 2 inches of rainwater in there, and this is why we need to save our rainwater. This will root in rainwater. It will not root in city water. It will root in your well water sometime if you've got a good well that doesn't have a lot of salt content in it. If I have to, sometimes I don't have enough rainwater, I will use distilled or bottled water, but rainwater is best because it's got nutrients in it. So I keep a bucket like this at my house with rainwater in it. I usually put about 2 inches, maybe 3 in something glass, and then I change this water about once a week. This one's a little green, means it's about time to change it. So I just pull this out, dump this out, get some fresh rainwater, and I put it back in here. But this one looks good. It's got some good roots on it. You can also root in pure perlite, and I've done that also. You take a bucket like this, stand your cuttings in there, put you about 4 inches of perlite in there, dampen it a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit of water in there. Put your cuttings in there, stand them like this, and they will root in there. The fastest I've done with rainwater, and it was a miracle, was 14 days. I know, it's unbelievable. Normally it takes a little bit longer. I think this one took a little bit longer, but about 14 days. Good places to buy plumeria. The Botanical Garden always has a few for sale. There's a couple of nurseries in town that get some good plumeria in there. There is also online sales. I like Florida Colors in Florida, and they send good, healthy plants at a reasonable price. We've also got Jim Little, he's in Hawaii, and Jungle Jack. So these right here are Jungle Jacks. And Jungle Jack is pretty famous. He actually has an area in the valley. I want to say it's by Eagle Pass, where they've got a warehouse there. And recently he had the first sale there. And plants were very reasonable, and they're normally about this size. Jungle Jack, you'll usually know because they'll be in a colored pot. It's this pot shape with this little weird edge on it. So you'll know, I know this is a jungle. If I'm at a nursery and I see a pot like this, and they're in different colors, but I see the pot with this little design on the side, then I know it's a Jungle Jack, unless somebody repotted it. But Brad's Buds and Blooms also is a good place to buy. They're also in Florida. I do a lot of purchasing from them. There's a guy named Mike Kennedy in Tiki Island, which is down there below Houston. He also has a place and a nursery. He's like a guy that just has a big plumeria greenhouse that he sells. There's also a real cool guy in Edna, Texas, and I bought from him some really unique ones that were hard to find. Edna's not that too far from here, and a lot of times, his name is Terry Harvey. He will be in Rockport at the market days, and he'll bring plumeria there. And so he's a good place to buy from. Nina Dawson also has a greenhouse in Gregory, and it's called The Love of Plants. We've got Gills and Turners here in town. The Plumeria Society of South Texas will have, hopefully, we're going to have 2 sales this year. To sell plumeria, some will just be cuttings, some will be rooted pieces. And guess what, guys? HEB has them sometimes. So if you go to HEB and see them, they're not going to be a named plant like Jungle Jack. It might just say red. But if you're not trying to have a fancy greenhouse with thousands of dollars worth of plumeria, it's a good, healthy plant. One other thing I would tell you, if you have a purple or a red, take very good care of it, because purples and reds are really hard to root. They're hard to get a cutting started, and they're hard to graft. Almost all the purples and reds you do buy are grafted, and I do have a handout on grafting. We're probably not going to cover all that today, but I do it in my other class. We do a grafting demo, but if you buy a plant and you see like a little V at the bottom like this, and you can see that it's kind of almost calloused, and there's another piece that's been stuck in there, it's a grafted plant. And normally that's gonna be your bright reds and your purpley type colors, because those are real hard to root, and they're real hard to graft too. So somebody's doing a lot if they're trying to get that out. I would say do your due diligence and practice safety. Keep your area clean, keep your insects down, check for diseases. Try to use as little chemicals as you can, but know that sometimes you need to, no matter what, because if you don't, it's just gonna spread through the brush. You know, it's just like these spider mites. Spider mites like warm, dry areas, and a lot of times in greenhouses, they'll just spread, you know, so we wanna try to get rid of them, and they'll be on your Esperanza, they'll be on everything. So be very proactive with your stuff, but do your due diligence right now. So we're going to be checking our plants, checking them for diseases, trimming extra leaves off. We're gonna pot them. We're gonna make sure we have a right potting mix. After you put them in there, remember, no water, no leaves. So that's really important. If you feel like you have to break the golden rule. The golden rule is no water, no leaves. If you feel like you have to and you're just dying, only do 1 cup of water and put it right at the center by the stalk. It's better to mist it, but wait. If you start getting a little leaves or claws, and I was told this one time, 4 leaves, you've got roots. So once you kind of see you've got 4 little leaves on there, like this one has 2. This one would probably be okay to water. It's almost got a third coming up, but a plant like this that only has this 1 little claw in here, don't water it. So, but if you have to, only give it 1 cup of water and pour it right down in the center. Okay? Do you have any questions?
Water with your tears.
Yes, because you will cry when it becomes California Sally like this. I'm just about to die about this one. But it's good. Yes, ma'am.
In light of the death last
Yes.
February, some friends sent me a bunch of plumeria cuttings. I had just started with the plumeria.
Sure.
I got them in October, so I knew that everything was gonna
Dormant.
hold out.
Yeah.
So I put them in a bucket, and the bloody things leaked out and flowered out.
And they will. Do you have roots yet?
There was some roots on the bottom, but really not that many.
What she's saying, she had a bunch of cuttings and she just stuck them in a bucket and they went crazy. And they do it sometimes because we're in Texas. We can't predict what happens here. With our weather especially, we have bipolar weather. So what I reckon, because it's hot today, what's going to happen Thursday? Okay. So what I would recommend in your case is to go ahead and go cut your leaves off and leave little nubs. And then the ones that have roots on them, go ahead and pot them. And the cuttings that don't have roots, I would probably just get me some perlite and put it in the bucket in there. Just put a little water in the bottom, just a little bit. You just want it damp, not wet. And try to root them first, because it's a little bit hard sometimes to take a cutting with nothing on it and stick it in the dirt. You can do it, but you have a chance of losing it. I don't like to take those chances with plumeria, especially when they're expensive sometimes. So I would recommend cutting all your leaves off. The ones that have roots, go ahead and put them in dirt and just kind of let it go. But take your other cuttings, leave them in the bucket, add your little perlite in the bottom so it'll hold a little moisture, and or water root them. If you got some rainwater, water root them.
Well, it's kind of late now. That was.
I know. It's hard. Rainwater has been hard to come by. Yes, ma'am.
I have a plumeria that's growing like that. And so I don't know if I should take it out and, because it's growing like almost sideways, both of them.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Well, a couple of things. Sometimes they just do that, and sometimes it's because the branches get real heavy and they start bending down. But if it's a baby, like a young one, they sometimes naturally just fall. Couple of things. How tall is it?
Oh, it's about this tall. growing like that, but, and it survived the freeze from last year.
Yeah, there's
Covered
some,
up, but it worked, I
Yeah,
guess, from the
some,
freeze.
there's a couple of things you can do. A lot of people would just trim them and maybe cut like about right here, so you have a new piece to, and when you have it shorter, sometimes you can get some floral tape, and I've got just some floral tape, and you can kind of try to pull it a little bit, but you gotta do it real slow, like here, and then tape it a little tighter, because it'll break. But if you cut the limbs off sometimes and keep those tops to reroot them, that'll take a little bit of weight off. But sometimes they just kind of do what they're gonna do, and you have your flowers on the ground.
Right.
So or they grow like this straight up, and you just have this straight up stick. The theory on this is a lot of times to cut these. And when you cut these, a lot of times right where those smiles were that we talked about, you'll get new limbs. And I was told one time, but I know it's not true now. I was told that when you cut it, you get two. But I have cut some and I've gotten one limb. So I guess it was a false information. So we'll go from there. And this one, you can really see the smiles real good if y'all want to look at it. So anyways, any more
And
questions?
Renee, when you cut those, it's still always at a 45-degree angle.
Yes.
With a little rain to go on.
Yes, always keep a 45-degree angle and let it callus over, check it a little bit, because sometimes it makes a little cup area right there. And you want to make sure water doesn't stand in there, and then use your wood putty if you need to. Yes, sir.
When do you decide to, like that one you just had there, when to cut it and reroot it?
I would probably I would do this one now, and I know why this one's real long. This one is a seedling, and I saved this one to graft other plants on, because I want to say this one either is a pink or a white, and it's a noise, so it has no ID. And I let the seedling grow tall because I was going to cut it about right here. I'm going to root this top back to save for later, because now I have a good root stock. So the root stock down here, I've got roots. I can make me a V-cut, take my, let's say a red or one of my fancy purples, graft it on here, because I know I've got good roots already. So that's why this one was allowed to get so big. It's either a white or a pink, just a common. And the top, when I reroot this top, I'm going to use this top as also another grafter for later. So it's kind of like we got a plan for the future a little bit. And I like grafting. And when we do the next class, next time, we'll do a little grafting demo. But yes, sir.
So I have a question similar to what she had. I have a plumeria that I left outside this winter, and it's at a 45-degree angle, and I want to make it straighter. So should I dig it up and replant it?
So hers are the limbs going, but you feel like yours kind of
Yeah,
drifted
the whole
over.
thing is
Yeah,
45.
yeah, you can do that. So get your sharpshooter, the shovel with the long, narrow. Get your sharpshooter. Probably depends on how big your trunk is.
Maybe a couple inches.
Okay, go out probably about 12 inches around your trunk. Go all the way around with your sharpshooter to make sure that you are going to maybe cut some taproots. I don't know, you might not. It should be just a little root ball like this one. Go ahead and dig it up and check it for disease and everything, like we said. Go ahead and dig it up and then straighten it like you're saying. Pack the soil down, and I would probably put a little stick in there, like a little bamboo stick. You can order them on Amazon. They come in like 3 foot. Stick it up, make it straight, and just kind of watch it. Make sure not to also take a zip tie or something tight and put it on this plumeria with, have the little sticks, because it will girdle the plant and it'll kind of like cut off nutrition. So yes, sir.
Yeah, I've had my plumeria plants inside a garage with the door usually closed. Should I keep the door closed or open it up and give it some light?
Well, they're dormant. So that's like our bipolar weather we have here. They're going to get confused. It kind of doesn't matter right now because we're almost ready to take them out of the garage. But I saw somebody say the other day, they had them in the garage, they put them out in the sun, and they put them back in the garage, they put them back in the sun. It's not a good idea because the plants are kind of confused, and we already got confused plans for February last year. So we've got stuff going on. Yes, Beth?
Can you give them a head start by putting them near a sunny window indoors until it's time to put them out?
That probably wouldn't hurt, but make sure they don't get sunburned, because sometimes the glass on the window will magnify that sun a little bit, and they'll get a little bit of sun damage.
Okay, so a few feet back, like
Yeah.
you would with, like
As long as
string
you
of
don't,
pearls.
as long as you don't take them in, take them out, take them in, take them out. Normally, kind of towards the end of February, we take out our plumeria, and like I said, the Plumeria Society's gonna put them back in the ground March the 5th. But I'm not taking mine out of the greenhouse till around March the 15th. I'm a little worried about this year.
Or maybe a north or east window, something more mild.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this lady with the pink.
Yeah, I have some clippings at home that I've had from last year, and I didn't pot them. Do I need to cut the bottoms?
No, if they have a good callus on there, I've kept them in a bucket for 2 years. And as long as they're healthy and you don't see tons of wrinkles, they're fine. Feel them. That's a good thing. You have to kind of squeeze it sometime to just kind of like I squeezed that one. I found that was big. Just kind of squeeze it. As long as you feel some good firm meat, you're good to go. You may have some wrinkling because it's not had water for a while, but just mist it with a little bit of water. They actually absorb some water through this. And I'll tell you an example. One time there was a tree, a plumeria tree here at the Botanical Garden. I don't even know what the name of it was or nothing. Well, somebody cut it up with the intention that they were going to repot the cuttings, and they laid them on the side of the greenhouse. Those things laid there for 4 years. So we were cleaning up one day, and I was out there at the greenhouse, and I saw those over there, and I went and looked. There was this stick, no roots, leaves, and flowers. And they were fragrant. They were huge, like 4 inches across, and they had been laying in the weeds. And people had went over them with weed eaters and everything, and they had been there 4 years, because we started figuring out, like, when did somebody cut this up? So we were doing our homework. So anyways, so we're gonna end right now.